everyone, Miko here with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. Thank you for joining us for our free Wednesday Zoom calls. Here you're watching on YouTube, but you could also join us on Wednesday. If you're interested in the link to these calls to join live, feel free to send us an email at info@behavioranalystsupervisor.com. You can also just check out our Instagram. We post questions every single day on Instagram. We also post the link to our free Zoom calls. Every Wednesday, we go through a different task list item area, such as A1. We'll talk a little bit about that task list item, and then we'll go through 3 mock exam questions relating to that task list area. We hope that this provides an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about the task list and also dive deep into question dissection. We here at Behavior Analyst Supervisor really focus on providing explanations on why an answer is correct and why it's also incorrect. So we appreciate that you joined us. If you have any questions throughout the duration of this video, feel free to shoot us an email, hit that like and subscribe button for more information. Also, you can always leave a comment and we'll be sure to reach back out to you. Thanks again, and I'm Miko with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. You'll also be hearing from Amy and Kevin. Talk to you soon.
Hey everyone, Miko here with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. Welcome to another installment of our free Wednesday Zooms. Just wanted to say hi for those of you who haven't seen my face. If you have, you probably know me, but I'm going to shut off my camera so that way it's not on when we upload this to YouTube, but just wanted to pop in and say hi. So shut off my camera and then we'll get rolling. Before we get started, a couple quick announcements. This weekend we have next weekend, we have our Section B intensive. So if you're a part of our All You Need Guaranteed, that link is in your account. Other than that, we are going to learn or talk a little bit about I-5, use performance monitoring, feedback, and reinforcement systems. Section I tends to be one of those sections that are very difficult for a majority of people when it comes to the task list. I think it's for a couple of reasons, but the primary reason I think is because we're all humans and we don't implement this, or let me rephrase that. Our supervisors might not always implement this the way the Cooper book wants us to, or the supervision handbook wants us to. And so it can be kind of difficult. And I'm not saying the way our supervisors implement it is wrong by any means. I'm just saying that based on the handbook and behavior analytic principles, what we should be doing or what the test wants us to do is just a little bit different than what I've seen, experienced, and even what I've done as a supervisor. So first and foremost, just to put this into context, we should be approaching Section I just like we approach Section H. Section I should be absolutely 0% different than any other section you approach. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is you need to prioritize reinforcement. You need to teach a skill before you can reinforce it. We teach using behavior skills training. After you've taught a skill, you need to maintain it. We maintain using reinforcement. If you need to determine if a skill is being maintained. So not maintain it itself, because only reinforcement maintains a skill. But if you need to determine if it's being maintained or not, then you could conduct fidelity or treatment integrity checks, as we call them. Fidelity, treatment integrity is the same thing, or it's used interchangeably. There's a slight difference, but in this context, it's typically used interchangeably. The other thing to remember is that you should all check out the BACB Supervisor Training Curriculum 2.0. It's a document available on the BACB's website. You can just Google it. I would highly recommend each of you read through it and be as familiar with that document as you are with the ethical code. It's just bulleted list, so it's nothing crazy. It doesn't take a whole long time to read or anything like that. So please check it out. If you want to debrief or you have any questions, you can always email us, info@behavioranalystsupervisor.com. A couple other things with Section I, and this is the big one. We don't have any questions about it today, I don't think, but I always love to stress this, is say you have a supervisor that's not implementing a procedure correctly, or who is not, let's just use the example we all probably have experienced. There's likely someone at your place of work that does not submit their session notes on time. To be honest, as an RBT, I was totally that person. And we all probably know that person, or we are that person. If you don't know them, you probably are them. So maybe you submitted your session notes late or not by the deadline. What typically happens is you get an email, right? They say, hey, session notes need to be completed within 24 or 48 hours or by Friday, whatever your organization says. So then after you do that, what happens next? Well, the next thing that probably happens is you continue not to submit them. And so then you get called into a meeting, and probably at first it's just your supervisor. And they say, hey, Miko, why haven't you been submitting your session notes on time? And then I'll say, well, I work with this client. It's very difficult. I don't have enough time, blah, blah, blah. Right. So I tell them. And then later I still don't submit it. So then I get called in with HR and then write up and all the things, right? That's probably the process. And you can replace session notes with anything. You show up to work late. What happens? Probably a meeting. You talk about why you're late. You break a company policy. What happens? Well, you probably have a meeting. You talk about why. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And, a lot of organizations do that. I'm just saying that is not a behavior analytic approach. Section I would like us to take a behavior analytic approach. And so when those things happen, the first thing we should be doing is determining the contingencies that govern the behavior. What does that mean? Well, it means find the function, just like you would in section H. You're going to find the function of the behavior, and then you're going to directly target that function, prioritizing reinforcement, minimizing the use of punishment, and going from there. You want all of your interventions that you select to be function-based. So that is, I think, one of the major reasons we struggle with I is because we look at what our supervisors do. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just not right in the context of the test. And so make sure you're taking a behavior analytic approach. And just, I like to use this one illustration because I feel like it sticks, but think about it this way. If you're working with a client and you're trying to teach them how to clap their hands, and you've been in 3 sessions and they haven't clapped their hands, are you going to schedule a meeting with that client and say, why are you not clapping your hands? No, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. I hope we would never do that. It's not behavior analytic, and likely you're not going to get an answer. And if you do, you're not going to get the answer that you want. And so instead, let's take ABC data collection. Let's, if you do an interview, make sure it's behavior analytic in nature, and you're not asking why, but you're asking, what happens before session notes? What happens after session notes? Things that you might actually use in an interview, because indirect assessments are a type of assessment. It's just we know that we never ask why, because that leads to subjective answers and not objective. So that is my spiel. That's like a 5-minute lecture that I just gave y'all. I don't usually lecture like that, so I apologize. But I think it's very important to remember that piece of things for section H. So we're going to work through a couple of questions primarily related to these 3 things. So the questions that we're working through are related to monitoring, they're related to feedback, and they're related to reinforcement. So I think I have 1 question for each. Let's go through them. Answer in the chat. It's just for accountability purposes. And then after we get done, I'll answer any questions that y'all have. So let's do it. Question number 1. Sorry, I have so much going on my screen. While working with a client in the home setting, the RBT implements an extinction procedure incorrectly. So they implement an extinction procedure incorrectly. Caregivers are sitting nearby and intently watching the session. How should you respond? So just a test-taking skill, when you read a scenario, picture it in your head. What does this actually look like? Well, I'm implementing a program. Caregivers are there. So it's me, caregivers, and my supervisor. I implement the program wrong. What is the supervisor supposed to do? So A, should they correct the RBT and model the procedure implementation? Model the proper implementation. Should they B, meet with the RBT directly after the session to discuss the error without the caregivers present? Should they send a text to the RBT after the session requesting a meeting? Should they explain the error and your disappointment in the implementation of the program when it occurs? So go ahead and throw your answer in the chat. A, B, C, or D. Don't pick D, hint, hint. And then we'll go ahead and go through it. There's lots of answers in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and go through each one. A, correct the RBT and model proper implementation. I honestly really like this answer for 2 reasons. And some of you might have picked B. I think probably some of you picked B, but I'm going to tell you right now, A is the correct answer. And the reason A is the correct answer is because we do provide feedback immediately. Now, if there's something where it might be inappropriate to provide it immediately. Like you have an RBT that clams up and gets very, very discouraged when you provide feedback in person in front of other people, then maybe you can tailor your feedback specifically to them. And I think you should tailor it, right? We should tailor it specifically. But this is important because the caregivers are watching what you're doing. They're watching the implementation. And you always want to be teaching them to implement the program. And so if we have an RBT that implements it incorrectly, I'm the supervisor, I'm there. I see this happen. The caregivers see this happen. They might think that's how the procedure should be implemented. So we're going to correct the RBT. We're not going to make a big deal out of it. Mistakes happen. We're all human beings. We're going to model the proper implementation. That way the RBT can see it. That way the caregivers can see it. Now, I will say you need to be a little bit cautious and delicate when you're doing this because we certainly don't want to make the RBT look incompetent. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. As a supervisor, yes, you are in charge of the case, but the RBT is there 99% of the time. Or should I say 95% of the time, because 5% of the hour should be supervised. But irregardless of what's going on, you need to do this in a way that is respectful. Supervisors should always obviously do that, and in a way that you're not undermining the RBT. Now, ultimately, right, you do need to model the proper implementation. You should do it immediately. So I would also, this is an aside, but I would also increase reinforcement for that session. And frankly, I try to increase reinforcement anytime I do caregiver training. So that way the caregivers can really see not only reinforcement in action, but know that the RBT is doing a good job. And hopefully they are because you're supervising them and all of that stuff. B, it's not a terrible answer. It's just the second best. Like I said, since the caregivers are there, we want to ensure that we're modeling the proper procedure for them because ultimately they're going to be the one that's implementing it. Eventually, we want to work ourselves out of a job. We're not going to send a text that's not immediate. And what's a meeting going to do? Like it's after the fact. Yes, you might still have a meeting if it was super egregious or something like that. But in the moment, that's not an appropriate answer. And D, explaining your disappointment. I don't think that I have a very strong opinion on disappointment. I don't think a supervisor should be disappointed. That's like something your parents are to you. Disappointment is, I think, something that should be reserved. But anyways, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is the fact that we don't want to do that in the sense that it's punishment and we should prioritize reinforcement. So that's critical. All right. Next up is this one. While working with the client in the home setting, the RBT implements we just did that one. So let's go to the next one. In order to maintain your supervisee skills, which of the following might you do? Play behavior jeopardy and give prizes for correct answers at each staff meeting. Use behavior skills training. Conduct treatment integrity regularly, or conduct IOA regularly. Which of those would help us to maintain our supervisee skills? Cool. We have lots of answers in the chat. I try to give you a little hint by emphasizing the word maintain. So that's our keyword here. So a couple of things. If you're maintaining it, it means we've already taught it. We don't want you to assume anything on the test because assuming can put us into a bad place where we might pick the wrong answer because we're interjecting our own opinions. We don't want you to do that. But it's okay to assume, unless the question tells you otherwise, that you are an ethical behavior analyst and that you're going to follow the steps that you should follow as an ethical behavior analyst. One of those steps is to teach using BST. So if this said in order to teach your supervisee, then you would use BST. It doesn't, it says to maintain. So you should assume, because again, maintain is after you've taught them, that you've already done BST. So let's eliminate that. Let's go to IOA. Conduct IOA regularly. Well, remember, IOA is me observing a behavior and you observing a behavior and us measuring if that behavior matches. So if a client is engaging in elopement, we can conduct IOA. I can't conduct IOA on a supervisee's behavior unless maybe there's another supervisor there and then we're both doing it. But IOA just tells me the amounts of a behavior, not the amount or how close you are implementing a procedure as written, right? That's treatment integrity. It's two different. And then let's circle back to C, conduct treatment integrity regularly. So in order to determine if a skill is being maintained, we might conduct treatment integrity. but we don't conduct treatment integrity to maintain it. So there's a little bit of verbiage there, and the verbiage is super important on this test, and I really want you to learn that. So in order to maintain means we need to reinforce. In order to determine if something is being maintained, that's different. We would conduct treatment integrity to see if it's being maintained, but to maintain it, we would do A, play behavior jeopardy and give prizes for correct answers at each staff meeting, because we can ask questions that are directly related to the program implementation, and we can give prizes, reinforcement. And it's really fun. Doing this at staff meetings is super fun. If y'all don't do it, you should recommend that your company do it. Also, I'm just a big Steve Harvey fan. So, oh, that's Family Feud. Wrong game, y'all, wrong game. Who leads Jeopardy? I don't know. It used to be Alex Trebek. I don't think he leads it anymore, so don't know. Yes, Miss Catherine.
So when I read this question, I read it as like your supervising skill like with a specific client. So, and like I said that it was C, but from you kind of cut out a little bit when, and it was my connection. But you said it's not C because that's not how you maintain it, correct?
So, yeah, so C is how you determine if it's being maintained, but in order to actually maintain it, you're going to use reinforcement. So,
so how would you word the question for the answer to be C then?
Yeah, so I would say in order to determine if your supervisee skill is being maintained, which of the following might you do? So I would just change it to past tense, and then to see if they're continuing to implement it correctly or something like that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. This is a good question, and this is one of the harder ones that a lot of people get mixed up, but really look for those small details. So difference, right? One more time is maintain is to reinforce. To determine if something has been maintained, past tense, is to observe using treatment integrity, because that tells me how close to the how close are you implementing a program to the way it is written. So that's just the small difference there. Again, this is a hard question. So sweet. Last one, y'all. So here we go. To maintain a high level of fidelity after teaching your supervisee to implement a procedure, which of the following should you do? A, use punitive contingencies. B, have regular meetings to discuss their program implementation, their progress implementing the procedure. C, use token economies with individualized rewards. Or D, ensure other stakeholders are present during the initial trainings of the RBT. So to maintain, not to determine if it's maintained. To maintain a high level of fidelity. You can throw your answer in the chat. Hence, only one of these answers is reinforcement, so I hope that's what you're looking for. And hopefully you picked C. So C, token system with individualized rewards, is the implementation. Punitive reinforcers, that's punishment. We don't do that. Regular meetings, we know meetings are not necessarily behavior analytic in nature. Now you could conduct meetings to do trainings or things of that nature, and that might help. And if you have reinforcement at meetings, then that would help. But in general, the way this is written, that one doesn't work. And then D, when you're first training an RBT, likely the stakeholders aren't going to be present, the caregivers aren't going to be present, the client won't even be present, because when we use BST, first thing we do is, so the 4 main steps of BST, right? Step 1, provide a written and verbal description of the skill. Step 2, I model it. Step 3, we rehearse it together. Step 4, I answer any questions and provide feedback. And then we do that as a continuous loop until the skill has been shown. So the best answer here is C, because that's the only one that's reinforcement. Sweet. So let me just go to the website real quick, like we always do, and then I want to open it up for questions. So let's escape. Let's go to the website. As y'all know, the next Breakdown the Beast isn't until November something. But if you go to the exam prep side of things, you can see our calendar. So like next week is the 26th. Man, it's flying. It's already almost the 26th. But next week we will be going through ethics. This is the responsibility to clients and stakeholders. So we'll talk through maybe the couple most important parts of section E. We won't be, or section E4. We won't be able to get through all of them because there's like 12 or 14 or 16 or something, but we'll get through a good bit. And then obviously there's more information about our packages, So you can look here to see that individual items. You can look there to see that. But for now, let's open this bad boy up for questions. Miss Catherine.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, no, you're all good. No worries. Does anyone have questions? Let me look in the chat. And then I also want to make sure.
What was the document that you were referring to earlier?
Yes, that document is the Supervisor Training Curriculum 2.0. So just make sure that you can Google it and find it that way. It's kind of important. It's how, honestly, it's how we write all of our section I questions. So before you take our section I mini mock even, I would recommend that you do read through that because it's going to be helpful. Miss Victoria.
Is there a difference between treatment integrity versus treatment fidelity?
So 90% of the time, and even the Cooper book says this, the terms are used interchangeably. There is a slight difference. So we have one question. It's a ways back in Instagram. I maybe posted it like in August or something. So it's a good bit back. But so typically, I can turn my face on so you guys can see me. Typically, they're used interchangeably. However, technically, fidelity itself is how close a study is being implemented to the way it's written. So this refers to like a study, and it refers to all phases of the study, including baseline. So like during baseline, we shouldn't be providing any sort of anything, right? Because it's baseline. Now, integrity refers to how close the program is being implemented to the way I've written it. So that's more related to like applied practice. So technically, when we're talking about applied practice, which we usually are, the best term to use is integrity, but they are used interchangeably. So it's important to know that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I sure can. So shaping within versus shaping across topographies. So this was hard for me to learn at first, but once I learned it. And so hopefully I can help you. Shaping within means the behavior stays the same. It means I increase the duration, the frequency, the magnitude of the behavior, right? Sitting in a chair. If I'm shaping within topographies, you're going to sit for 5 seconds and then 10 seconds and then 20, right? Behavior hasn't changed. I've shaped within the topography. Whereas shaping across means the behavior changed, right? If I say hi to Miss Kai, I would say hi, right? That's one way. I could just wave. That's another way. So I might shape it to a wave. Or like a peace sign says hi sometimes. And so the actual behavior changes. The function is always the same, the outcome, right? Because the topography changes, but what you're accomplishing, saying hi, stays the same. So that's the difference within. And I just think of that as like within the behavior doesn't change. Across the topographies, the behavior actually changes. So that's the difference between those. There are a lot of terms that there's a question in here that says, are there other terms that may be synonymous? There's a lot of AKAs, and maybe I'll take one of these sessions one week just to go over AKAs. For y'all, we can do that. I don't have the list on me right now, but we are working on a list for our study guide. So it'll be at the end of our study guide as soon as we finish that. So when we get that up, I'll let y'all know. So, all right. Yeah, SD versus MO, good question. So an SD simply signals that reinforcement is available, right? So it tells me, hey, I can access this, or hey, I cannot access it. For example, I'm sitting and there's a vending machine directly across from me. That vending machine is always an SD. I can always get something out of it. Doesn't mean that I engage in the behavior. It doesn't mean that I don't. It just means that it's there, right? Reinforcement is available. If it's unplugged, it's an S delta. I can't access it. So that's the first thing. SD doesn't always mean you engage in the behavior. It simply means that the reinforcer for the behavior is available. Your fridge, it's an SD. You can always get food out of it. Now, hopefully you don't get food out of it every time you walk by it, right? So it's always an SD, but it doesn't always mean you engage in the behavior. Now, an MO, on the other hand, increases or decreases the value of the reinforcer. So if I ran a marathon, then my MO for water is going to be more value, or water is going to be more valuable. So that vending machine, still an SD. The marathon is an EO specifically, but it's a type of MO. That value of the Gatorade is more valuable. Whereas if I just chugged a gallon of water because I'm trying to hit my water intake for the day, the Gatorade machine, still an SD, I'm probably not going to get a Gatorade from it though, right? So there's an abolishing operation. Value of Gatorade has decreased. So that's the difference. There is an SD for punishment. It's referred to as an SDP. So that just signals the availability of punishment. And then S delta signals no reinforcement is available. So that's that. I hope this is helpful as always, y'all. If you ever have questions, you can email us. I'm happy to jump on a 5 or 10 minute call with any of y'all, regardless of if you ever bought something from us or not. Happy to do that. Miss Catherine, you'll be the last question and then I'll spin the wheel.
So I took one of the mini mocks and I had a question, and it described that before a kid walked into his taekwondo, he fixed his uniform so he didn't get like reprimanded by his like teacher and stuff. And the answer was, and it asked like what is going to the place, I believe. And the answer was stimulus. Like they didn't have like an SDP, it was only like a discriminative stimulus.
Yeah.
So in that instance, like
Yeah,
I couldn't get more specific.
Yeah. So first off, can you send me the specific question and then I can explain it a little bit further? But what I'm thinking is either way, Taekwondo is going to be reinforcement. You want to go there so you can learn. So seeing the building signals that Taekwondo is available. Seeing the instructor would be the SDP probably, right? If the instructor is the person who reprimands you, they're going to be the SDP. Whereas the building itself is probably still something you like to do. So that Taekwondo building is going to be whatchamacallit, is going to be a reinforcer. So
Okay, well.
cool. All right, I'm gonna spin the wheel, y'all.